Okay, and you are live.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Truxton Heights Storm Drain Study Community Virtual Meeting. My name's Mike Rosberg. I'm a engineer with the City of Annapolis in Public Works, and I'm the lead engineer for this project. And I think I might have met a few of you already, either on the phone or in the email. And although I can't see you, it's nice to virtually meet you. I joined the city, just a little background on me. I joined the city in April of 2020, and previously was a storm water resource engineer in the consulting world. And so although it was pretty challenging to start in the peak of the pandemic, I'm glad that, and excited to start on this project and be involved with this. So I want to start by, I guess I'm going to introduce our panelists for the evening. We have various city staff and our consultants here. So with that, I'll just call your name, and if you can introduce yourself, that'd be great. We'll start with Mike Johnson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Johnson. I'm the director of the Department of Public Works, and I joined the city just shortly after Mike in July of 2020. And, we are sort of very excited to get going on this particular project and to sort of bring some relief to the community. Thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Yes, I'm Alderwoman Tierney. I'm your Alderwoman for the next 4 years. And I just want to tell you that we take stormwater management very seriously. We hired Michael, to lead the charge on that effort. As you know, we have very strict state requirements, and I have every faith that this job is going to get the attention it deserves, and I really look forward to it.
Great. Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Mckeon. I'm also an engineer in Public Works. I've been working with the city for about 5 years and have been involved in this project as well. So just here to lend a hand if needed.
Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Fox. I'm the project manager from the consultant side with A. Morton Thomas, or AMT, and really just was supporting Pete Zeta, who we're about to introduce, who did the main charge, and just give him like a sounding board to put ideas off of. So looking forward to interacting with all of you.
All right, and Peter.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Zeta. I've been with A. Morton Thomas for 22 years, but I've been the primary consultant on this project. And I'm looking forward to show you what we've come up, what we've developed, and hopefully get some good feedback from all of you in the community.
All right, Jim.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Cooper. I'm a landscape architect with Biohabitats. We're a sub-consultant to AMT on this project. Previously, we've done some extensive work within the Spa Creek watershed, and that we've restored a few streams that contribute to the cove itself. The main stem Spa Creek channel and Hawkins Cove, which is a tributary to that. So we're pretty familiar with the area. We understand the drainage dynamics, and we're happy to contribute to a solution that serves the community and functions in a ecologically functional way.
And Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Talley. I'm a water resource engineer with Biohabitats, and I'm just here to support all the people that already introduced themselves. So,
awesome. Well, and thanks everyone for making the time tonight. I know it's past working hours, but I think we're all excited to be working on this project. So to catch everyone up to speed so far, earlier last year, we met with AMT. We had our kickoff meeting, and we tried to gather all the information we had at the time, through all the various I know there are previous field meetings in the community in the past years, all the recorded complaints, written and visual photos and videos. So we tried to, collect all the information you had and begin our desktop and field evaluations. Desktop, we use, our GIS topo to get the drainage areas. the good idea of the drainage areas in the community. We really want to, and any other record drawings that, the city has as far as-builts to really try to get a, good idea of the hydrology of the area. And then we also did our field walks. I think most of you, here probably saw, like Peter mentioned, saw people, walking around the community, getting more field photos, measurements, so we can kind of get a snapshot of where we're at right now, as far as where we're at with the drainage in the community. And then from that, we started developing concepts. We want to develop concepts that, based on our experience, we feel are going to solve the problems, but also are just a feasible way to implement, drainage infrastructure in the community that the city would, feel comfortable with installing, that solves the solution. So tonight, AMT, they prepared a presentation to go over these findings, go over all the data we've collected, and present these concepts. And after the presentation, I think another important part of this is we're gonna, and as time allows, we'll open it up for questions. We want to hear from the community what we got right, what we didn't get right, what you liked about the concepts and what we didn't like. Nothing's set in stone right now. Again, these are just kind of our best takes at what we're at right now. And as the design goes, they can be tweaked and variations can be made, but we want to hear what you like, what you don't like. And the way we're going to be doing questions at the end, instead of using the chat box, what we'll do is use the raise your hand feature at the bottom, and we'll let you in and you can answer your questions. And even if, hopefully we can get to all of it. If not, we have the project webpage that, AMT will go over it. You can, answer the questionnaire that's available. But even if you don't feel like the questionnaire is really what, you think, is getting your point across, my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to me, and so we can, we really want this study and this report to really get a good grip on what the community is feeling. So with that, I'll let Peter, I believe you're going to be running the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Yep.
So just a quick background of what we knew about the community and the drainage problems, prior to coming out and actually doing a study, was that it's a built out community. It's fairly, old community. But there has been I guess, long-standing drainage issues and complaints. And what we kind of gathered from that preliminary information, what it was largely through a dearth of drainage infrastructure or a lack of infrastructure. So part of our goals were to come out and to catalog what you had and assess the conditions. And then from that, we would base our, proposed concepts on. So here, this slide is showing what our study goals were to assess, quantify, categorize, and prioritize the drainage problem areas. And prior to coming out, we did, like Michael had mentioned, we had some historical information and notes and photos from some of the residents. And these were sort of the 5 primary areas that we knew there were drainage problems and that we did investigate. And that's the graphic feature that you see here on the right. Silopana, we knew that there's a lot of drainage problems here in the backyard. The Spa Drive, there's a singular culvert that drains into Spa Creek that, there are flooding problems on Spa Drive. Boxwood Road is an open section road, and there was flooding reported, running into the residents' homes and in their backyards. And over here, there was some right-of-way runoff running into, I think, the 95 Spa Drive property and then down into Spa Creek. And then over here in the Acton Road area, there was reported some drainage problems areas. So from all that, our goal was to develop conceptual level drainage improvement measures. And we wanted to kind of, instead of just doing hard engineering or gray infrastructure type of storm drainage, we wanted to introduce green infrastructure, to help solve and mitigate some of those flooding issues. And green infrastructure is a real important thing in our industry right now. And a lot of municipalities are trying to, promote it as part of, climate resiliency and these type of things. So if you're not familiar with those terms, I provided a definition down here at the bottom. So gray infrastructure is like your classic storm drains, your curb and gutter inlets, this type of thing. Green infrastructure are your rain gardens, bioretention, infiltration, using more of the natural environment and soils to help, alleviate flooding conditions or maybe improve water quality, whatever the case may be. And so our approach was to reduce, not be overhauled in the neighborhood. We kind of wanted to blend in, do something, that would be, not too obtrusive. So, our goals were reduce or eliminate the environmental impact and improve the quality of life. So this is what we cataloged for existing drainage structures. This is what the slide is showing you here. So there were 5 structures that we identified. One was the culvert on Silopana Road that you see here by icon A. The drainage culvert in the Spa Creek, it seems like it's been there probably since this community started. And then some ancillary structures that we found along Acton Road were just standalone structures, a catch basin and a short run of pipe and then an outfall. And we identified C, D, and E here. They were just inlets and storm drains, nothing substantial, just, simple drainage structures. So that's all we found in the community that's, existing drainage infrastructure. We did look at Chatham Lane. There is a storm drain system that runs along here, but there is a terminal inlet at the end of the cul-de-sac, but everything drains back towards Hilltop Lane. We did investigate the enclave. Michael provided some as-built, and what I understand and review those as-built is half of this property drains towards, I think it's Spa Road to the left, to the west, and then half is managed through an underground storage chamber and then released at a controlled rate down the hillside through a flow spreader in the direction of Silopana Road. The computations show that the post-development discharges are lower than what was there previously. But this being a big hillside, a lot of the runoff that does fall on the hillside still flows down unmanaged towards Silopana Road. And this is the drainage area that we developed for the community. So this large green area here is the total drainage area that drains to the Spa Creek, the culvert there. That's roughly 27 acres. And then these sub areas, what we delineated were either to the drainage structures themselves or to where we had reported drainage complaints. So this area 1A and 1B, everything kind of drains down towards the crossing culvert on Silopana Road. This area 1B drains right to the head of the culvert, and everything else kind of drains towards the other side and down into this stream channel. The sub area 2 was what was reported that these homeowners were getting surface runoff and going into the basements. And so I wanted to delineate that to get an idea of the sense of the drainage area getting there. And then this homeowner had complained about, runoff getting into a property and causing flooding. So drainage area 3 represents that. These kind of brown colored drainage areas just represents what's draining to those additional drainage structures that I had previously identified. So all this information that you see in the background, it was gathered either through the Anne Arundel County GIS or the state GIS database. So it's, all state information that's available to everybody that's on this presentation. So site pictures. So we had to go through the community and, we had a chance to talk with many of the residents, and they did supply us with some photos of, historical flooding problems. And so what you see here is the drainage conditions on Silopana Road. I thought this one was the most telling because you can see the road is sort of pitched at such an angle that, yeah, the runoff does collect along the curb, the asphalt curb and gutter. But then as it approaches the homeowner's driveways, it sort of kicks off and sort of goes into their private properties. Well, we don't want to have that. Here is the crossing culvert on Silopana Road, a little bit of ponding here with this picture. This picture I took here is where you see my auto. There's ponding right at the head of the culvert, and this was with minimal amount of rainfall during that afternoon. So this condition is, it's sitting there even before a large rainfall, prohibiting efficient drainage. So Further on Silopana Road, this is the residence just upstream of the crossing culvert at 96. I think one of the contractors had put a catch basin in and to the resident's front yard and connected it to the crossing culvert. The homeowner at 74 Silopana Road, she said that she had a contractor install this to, help with some of her drainage conditions. I assume it works as sort of like an infiltration trench and slows down some of the velocity. I took this picture at the outfall of the culvert at Silopana Road. You can see there's a throat, a curb opening throat down into the stream channel. One of the things I did notice here is there was really no erosion. It's a very stable channel. So in developing the conceptual measures, we want to maintain those conditions. We don't want to exacerbate them and create future problems for anybody. The reason I supplied this photo is because that earlier shot where I showed you there was ponding, I thought there would be some potential to do like a curb inset bioretention, maybe to alleviate some of that drainage. But we have a sanitary utility here that would need to be correctly surveyed, and also if we did something like that, you'd either have to take some easement taken from the property owner or have to bump it out into the road, and it's a very narrow road. So this is further up on Silopana, that's 66. This is the Alton property. Ms. Alton supplied these photos, but you can see, what they're dealing with here. This obviously is not just runoff that falls directly on the property. It's coming from offsite from the Farragut Court apartment complex. It's almost like a river. They have their pool here, and they've tried to mitigate this by putting in some pumps, but you can see that's quite an overwhelming amount of water. 10 inches deep, she noted here, and it runs into the fence line. So, some severe problems when you get big rains. This is at Mr. Wells' property at Silopana Court. So the things that I picked up here was, the main thing was there's a berm on the enclave property that seems to be offset from his fence line. And you can just imagine any runoff that would fall off of these townhomes or down this hillside, by virtue of the natural topography, sort of makes its way down into his property. He's tried to kind of prohibit some of that by this vinyl sheeting here, but he tells me he gets overwhelmed at times. This is looking down towards Silopana Court and Mr. Wells' property. It's I think it's 3 Silopana Court. Initially, this gravel trench that you see here in the foreground, I thought it was an interceptor trench, but it is actually the flow spreader that I mentioned earlier. So there is a storm drain pipe that terminates in here, and I guess it discharges, and then as the flow comes out, it's spread along this base. It doesn't discharge with concentrated flow, so its intent was to like minimize, the amount of flow that comes out. It probably does contribute to some interception of the overland runoff, but in any event, these people downstream of this property seem to be suffering. This photo here I wanted to show because this is an empty lot adjacent to Mr. Wells, and I thought it would have been a great spot to do some kind of green infrastructure measure, but you can see by these 2 utilities, there are water and sanitary sewer lines coming through here, and it's logistically unfeasible to kind of make that work. So, Boxwood Road, this is the other priority area. This is all open section. One of the things that caught my attention was this kind of condition where you see erosion. I think curb and gutter here would be a simple fix, and that's one of the conceptual measures we're proposing. But what we got from some of the historical reporting was that runoff used to come into this property at 34 Boxwood Road, and I think the homeowner had a basement she had to fill in with backfill just to stop that flooding. And one of the things I noted, or I picked up on this open section of road, I thought this was an area, these kind of like small gaps in here where there's kind of like dead pavement or asphalt, that they have potential to install green infrastructure. And we'll get into that as I show you the conceptual measures. This is the intersection of Spa Drive and Boxwood Road. I mentioned earlier that 195, I think Spa Drive residents, she gets runoff from the right of way into her property and it floods. But you can see by virtue of the ponding what's happening there. I took this photo, I think in the winter, but you can see the asphalt is a bit stressed. But, there's an intersection of Boxwood and Spa Drive, but it appears to be the intersection of a bunch of utilities. You have the fire hydrants, the water main, and it looks like a telecommunications junction box. As we get into the conceptual measures, I just wanted to point this photo out. It is a low spot area and it's a bit challenging because we want to kind of get the water away from her property and down the right of way and maybe capture it in that catch basin that's further down the road. But you can see what challenges we're faced with here. So it would require a little bit more survey and a little bit, creative engineering, I would say. So this is the Spa Drive culvert. This is, again, I was out on a rainy day. It wasn't raining that hard. I may have come post a big downfall, but you can see what's happening. There's roadway sediment has accumulated along here and vegetation is growth. So there's not efficient runoff from the road. I think a lot of this could be corrected with just general vegetation maintenance. Nothing I saw here indicated that the roadway is under stress, where there's piping around the culvert or the roadway is being damaged. I didn't pick up on any of that, but it is under tidal influence, as you can see here. This is not all just from, rainfall runoff, and Jim might even know more about the Spa Creek area than I do, but you can see it reduces some of the capacity of the culvert. And it looks like this may have been put in post, the culvert to alleviate some of the ponding conditions. But just to talk about long-term fixes, we are dealing with projected sea level rises in Chesapeake Bay by the year 2030 and 2050 that could get up to 3 feet. And that's probably going to influence this very heavily. And city of Annapolis may want to be targeting this as part of their, resiliency plans for long-term fixes. These are the other drainage structures that we saw in the neighborhood. Like I said, they were unremarkable. They all looked in good condition. There was no damage to them or any kind of sediment or debris accumulation. The outfalls all look stable, going down into vegetated swales into Spa Creek. It's exactly what you want. We spoke at length with the 196 Acton property owner because this area had been identified as a problem area. She said there is no drainage or flooding issues. She does on occasion have to come out and maintain that, and that's what you're supposed to do. And she's very comfortable with it. And we walk down to where outfall is, and it's, no erosion or anything like that. So I kind of said, leave well enough alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So that's our assessment here. So these are our conceptual drainage improvement measures. I'm going to break them up into long-term and short-term. So with some discussion with Michael and iteration of a prior design, this is a solution that we came up that we think is going to do a big benefit to the Silopana properties. So this alignment that you see here, that's hatched in blue, this travels in the back of the Farragut Court apartment complex and then comes straight down through the 74 property. And I'll zoom in here. So it would connect to, it would be a retrofit of the culvert that goes under this driveway. This would be a catch basin with like throat inlets. And, if it's feasible, you connect to that existing inlet that I had shown you, which drains into this culvert. So this doesn't create any new additional drainage to this area. It actually shaves off about 50% of the drainage area that's getting here. Was I think 5.25 acres from my earlier drainage area map. But doing something like this, the success of it really is dependent on the cooperation of the community, because you can see that Michael and his team are going to have to go in and get an easement granted so that they can do this and install that. And sometimes, residents are a bit hesitant, what are you doing on my property, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in the long run, this will add value to the property. So something that could enhance the system by introducing green infrastructure would be, creating depressions here that, are planted with bioretention soil and, some kind of native landscaping. That would help infiltrate some of that runoff that comes here. So it's not just coming into the system and going out, maybe provide a little bit of attenuation. And the way I envision these, they would be no deeper than a foot and ponding no deeper than 6 inches. This is a sample picture of a project that we worked on. It's a bioretention, kind of something like that. It's not required, but I think it would enhance the system. So another short-term measure, you recall I showed you that picture where the water was running down Silopana and kind of draining into the driveways. I think an easy fix would be retrofitting these to this, more standard driveway entries with a concrete swale. So that runoff that's coming down the curb and gutter line would continue. It's not draining back into the driveways. We have to establish the right of way through a survey line because right now it's based on GIS, but it may require a little bit of, easement taking to get into some of these properties or just granting permission to, retrofit some of these driveways. So long-term fixes for this community. This is a storm drain line I had drawn through the middle of the road. The biggest challenge here is that it's sitting between the water and the sanitary sewer line, and there is very little horizontal distance between them. I think I just maximized what I could fit in there because the requirements from Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works is you got to maintain 5 foot of horizontal clearance. But it's an aged system, and I think long-term, with what we're seeing with changing climate, this is something that should be considered by the community or by City of Annapolis. Again, just to show you a better picture of Mr. Wells' property, you can see that this is a sanitary and sewer easement that comes down. There's really no space really to do anything here. So Boxwood Road, I mentioned that it was an open section. I think that a lot of drainage improvement can be achieved by just simply doing curb and gutter along this side of the road and draining it down to this culvert. It all eventually gets here anyway. And all that can be done within the right of way. And you remember those pavement gaps that I told you, I thought they were like dead asphalt. I thought they had potential to do these kind of curb bump outs. It's a green infrastructure measure. That's what I show by these red icons here. This is something that we did in a project a few years ago. We utilized the space between the sidewalk and the curb, and we made it work. Its primary function here was water quality. But this homeowner down here, she told me that, hey, since you guys put that in, the drainage problems have gone away. There's not as much flooding, et cetera. I made a mental note of that. So I thought in this context, that's how we want to approach that. So it wouldn't pond or stay in there. If anything overflowed, there'd be an opening on the downstream end and it would just continue down the curb and gutter. So that was a curb inset. This is a curb bump out. So you would have to claim a little bit of right of way. These are narrow roads in Truxton community. They're 20 feet wide, I think I measured. So maybe 3 to 4 feet you'd have to claim. Beyond drainage improvement measures, I think they add benefit to the community. They enhance it through beautification. You're promoting green infrastructure, and even these residents, I think it would add value to their property. So this is that intersection that Boxwood and Spa Drive. I kind of conveyed to you that we have a challenge at the low spot there. So the intent was to do some kind of conveyance structure through creative engineering or whatever we could do with with our skills and talents, kind of get that runoff to kick over into this direction and bring it down to this existing catch basin. I think the drainage area here was 1.3 acres, and we probably could get 3/4 of an acre off of that. So the only runoff would be onto the person's own property. So I talked about green infrastructure. I wanted to mention these groups because I think for any ambitious homeowners or community members that are so inclined, that these are great advocacy groups and support groups towards helping you achieve that, long-term and short-term. So I'm on this email chain of the Watershed Stewards Academy for Anne Arundel County. These seem to be all self-educated folks. They're very intelligent. They're probably as smart as some of the engineers, that I work with. But if you're inclined, and you want to go with green infrastructure, they would help you with technical guidance and support. And their whole goal is, to clean the watersheds in this type of effort. Also, the Spa Creek Conservancy. Betsy had mentioned this group to me, and I put it on here, kind of equivalent, more local. And then the Chesapeake Bay Trust, here you can get grants. Maybe they see you're doing green infrastructure and they go, hey, Truxton community, that's great, that's awesome. We want to give you $10,000 more to install rain barrels in all the houses. This probably could be an avenue for funding for that. So we had put up a webpage back in June, but we also met with many of you. So we met with you face to face, and we got a lot of your feedback from, personal interaction. But we did put up this questionnaire. Basically, it's saying, hey, where are the drainage problems? Do you have any ideas? And then some further questions from the city of Annapolis, regarding the community and how to enhance it. But we didn't get many feedback. So I think last month we checked, we only had 2 residents. So if you haven't been to the webpage yet, and you're listening this evening, I encourage you to go on there, because we don't want to finish this study and feel like anybody has been left out and say, hey, why didn't you pick up me? And that type of thing. So it's there. There is a date on there that says, hey, you got to fill it out by June 21st. Just if you're going to get on it tonight or in the near future, just disregard that. We'll update it, but don't let that stop you from filling this out if you have a chance. So that's the project webpage. And if you got questions, Michael has provided his email there, and that kind of wraps it up, and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. And if any panelists have questions too through this, feel free to ask.
I do want to ask a question, because I want to open it up to the residents. I'm on the green infrastructure. Would that not be part of the capital, the capital improvement project itself? Peter made it sound like it was the residents' responsibility in searching out advocacy groups, et cetera. And will green infrastructure be part of the project?
Yeah, we definitely want to include it in as part of the actual this CIP project. We also just want to note that there's still opportunities on because a lot of what we're going to do is try to be within the right of way as far as putting some of this green infrastructure, but it's also just other great opportunities not only to help if you want to help funding or help them. It's just a great resource for any other type of green infrastructure you want to do on your private owned residence. The more the better. And I think it's definitely something that we want to implement more in the city. And not only do they, they're appealing to the community. We think they work, and they do a good job. So yes, both. I think it'll be both in the project, as well as, an opportunity for residents to seek more.
Thank you, Michael.
I do have a couple questions from the residents. I'm going to let in Jerry Alton, and that will be followed then by Martin Brown.
Ms. Alton, I think you're still muted. If you can hear me.
Okay. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. So I have 2 questions. Number 1, for the study questionnaire, can someone maybe email it to me, and we can go to some of these neighbors who may not have internet access to fill it out?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's a PDF file. If that's something you can open, I'll email it to you. Okay,
perfect. The second question is talking about putting a drain behind the houses that affect 64 to 74. Is that some of our houses have fences, 6-foot fences, Would you be putting it inside of our yard or behind the fences?
So the one alignment that I showed you that was like shaded kind of blue.
Correct.
Yeah, where your husband has kind of put a little bit of that debris behind the fences to kind of get the flows away from your property.
Correct.
That's kind of where that catch basin would go.
Okay.
And it would be along the Farragut property line, entirely within that property boundary. And then it would turn onto 74, I think it was 74 Silopana Road. So it's
Okay.
capturing all that overland runoff before it gets into your property, but it's on the other side of the fence.
Okay. And I'm sure all of us on this side would have no problem with that, considering the flooding.
Yeah.
And making sure you had access.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. I can't believe there's no question.
Oh, I'll ask another one.
Go ahead.
Sure. You mentioned short-term versus long-term, I assume in implementation. Would I have the project construction not happening until fiscal year 2024? When you say short-term, are you implying that that could be something sooner than 2024, or could you delineate between the two?
Yeah, so short term, what I had envisioned when we talked about sort of a simplicity approach in our introduction, you know, not going to extremes, just to use some language to illustrate my point. I thought some of these measures that we had proposed, the short term measures, would be something that could be implemented by Michael and his team and probably an on-call contractor, you know, and the guise of stormwater management, maintenance, or drainage maintenance. So whatever might be on budget now, yeah, you can start putting in some of the curb and gutter stuff and then build on that. You know, a big project might be that storm drain that I had shown. But I thought something that an on-call contractor, you wouldn't have to put it out on the street for bids and get all this kind of, you know, information needed. Somebody could be ready to mobilize, you know, with a well-developed engineering plan and any kind of related permits, if that makes sense. The long term would be something because I think it's something that requires a little bit more detailed engineering, like putting the storm drain in the middle of the road. You know, you're dealing with a very old neighborhood and very old infrastructure. You want to make sure you get that right. That makes sense. That's how I thought about it. I don't know if Greg or the other guys want to chime in.
I'll add too, I think a big part of some of this design is land acquisition can take time, so that might take longer. But again, based on the feedback in this whole study, I think there are opportunities. More than likely there'll be some type of phasing of implementing all this infrastructure. Some will solve problems, but it will take a little longer to implement.
I have a message here that Heidi has her hand up.
Yes, actually, we do have 5 hands up. Right
Okay.
now, Martin Brown's in the room, and he'll be followed by Heidi. You can unmute, Martin. Oh. Martin, are you
Am I
there?
on? Yeah, so I'm at 56 Silopana, and I noticed on the diagram you didn't, it wasn't in red, and or most of the properties around the court, and when you guys were walking around, I took you into my backyard and showed you there's a river that runs diagonal across my entire property, and I think that the spreader is channeling the water into my backyard and then into my neighbor's backyard, and then his neighbor's backyard, and then it goes on to the street. And also it goes across the street, and because there's no curb and gutter on the other side of Silopana, it erodes all the front yards of those properties. So the question is, I didn't hear anything about controlling the runoff from the enclave. That's our major problem. And why couldn't the city, do something to have the enclave? They're the source. And it runs, after a big rain, it runs for days off of the enclave. I guess that's their controlled runoff, but it's controlled, but it's a deluge from our viewpoint.
Michael, did you want to take that?
Yeah, the enclave, and we did look at it. We know that that's a newer development that is yes, it all runs down that hill, and it is a newer development. So we do have their plans and their as-built as far as what their plan was to control the runoff on their site, and so we will, it's going to be tough to, I guess, implement something in the back on the, on your side of the of Silopana, but I think we're going to have to still look more into, they have a flow split, sure, they had a plan for what they wanted to do, but is there ways we can actually make sure that they're maintaining what they're doing? Did what they implement actually work? I mean, clearly we have signs that it's not working. So there's going to be, and I think we're going to have to speak with the enclave and their HOA to try to say, this was your plan and this is what the as-built showed, but, these need to be maintained. And if it's not the way it was designed, there's always how it was designed versus how it's actually functioning. A flow splitter is nice because it should promote sheet flow and not concentrate runoff. And then it's determining, well, was it implemented wrong? Is it not being maintained? So there's definitely still opportunity to hopefully reach out and try to make sure that it's being controlled correctly. And then, because again, it's going to be tough to maybe implement something, and we can still look into more options in Silopana Court. I know there's a utility there, but if there's maybe a way we can enter something in that might make more sense to, get the runoff into the street and control it in the right of way versus, like you said, making it run along your backyards. So we'll definitely try to maybe look into more options in that area.
And
And
go ahead, Greg.
Front yards of people across the street.
I was just going to say this presentation kind of highlights most of our findings and the approach, but the report we're working on is a little more detailed and that is captured in there. I do remember speaking with you and looking at those issues and basically between the enclave and working with them on how it was actually constructed, and then looking at other utilities that would have to be impacted. That would be more of a major project, kind of like you were talking about, Alderwoman, of something that would take a little more effort and be more of a long-term. But that is something we're addressing in the report, and I apologize we didn't highlight that in the presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, I just wanted to note that within the report, we'll have a section for homeowner improvements where we kind of do some of the conceptual layouts that you saw here in the presentation, but they're all within the private residence properties. So it's not something that we neglected or forgot about. That was our approach, but we wanted to present here tonight what we had reviewed with the city of Annapolis.
Could I just ask on Enclave? I don't know how any other way of asking this, but can we get anything else from the Enclave? I mean, their erosion control, stormwater scope that's what we see. I mean, the gravel ditch, et cetera. There's nothing else they owe the city or anything.
Yeah, so the way the grading permits work, they're in the bond reduction phase. So they're basically in their maintenance mode. So everything that was approved for the permit has already been installed, and now it's just a matter of making sure that they're maintaining it. So there's still technically the grading permit is not closed out, so there's still opportunity for us to try to make sure that what they installed is functioning the way it was intended to install, but there's no more features are being constructed.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Mm.
Heidi said she doesn't unmute. She can't unmute until you unmute
Yeah,
her.
correct. I'm just about to let her in. I do see 4 other panelists up, people with their hands up also. So we'll take them one at a time. Let me let Heidi in right now.
Be quiet, please.
Okay, Heidi, you're good to go.
Ms. Heidi, you're still on mute. Just, yeah, there you go.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm clear.
Yes? Great. Okay, I have a few different comments and a little bit of history for you. One is to say, just because there are several people on this Zoom tonight who were part of a meeting with David Jarrell several years ago before the enclave was approved, where we were provided reassurance that the stormwater situation would be greatly improved. This was David, greatly improved by the way the enclave was being developed. And I just wanted to give you that history because a bunch of us walked away from that with an understanding that these problems would be remedied. The second is also a piece of history to comment on the grants issue through the efforts of Cindy Domacy, who's on the Zoom tonight, and others. We applied for grants with the help of Spa Creek Conservancy, and we were unsuccessful in that. We did it for at least 2 years running. So while I think we're appreciative of green solutions, love them, we're not thinking we're going to get any money at this point. Perhaps you have some other information than that. My third point is to ask about the bioretention strategies and other green solutions. Who's responsible for maintaining those? I've understood that in other parts of the city, they've gone in and then either homeowners or church groups or others are expected to maintain them. And I was hoping you could speak to that specifically. I'll finish up my list and then ask you to respond if you don't mind. For the curb inset solutions, we have no sidewalks in most of our neighborhood, and we need to often step off to the side of the street. What I'm seeing there in your idea is that those would become green areas. While appealing, I'm worried about where are pedestrians and their dogs going to step out of the way of traffic. And since we have inadequate parking for cars in driveways, we use the street. And, won't people be needing to pull up their car onto those green areas? And then finally, I was hoping you could re-show us where the existing catchment is that's on Spa Drive, where you're talking about routing the water from 95 Spa up towards the circle. I just want to make sure we all understand where you're talking about that water, and is that water going to travel on the surface on the road, or is there something underneath the road that it would be drained into? I hope you got all that. Let me know if you need some clarification.
Yeah, Michael, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the maintenance, but I can double back.
Yeah. Yep, I'll go to the maintenance. Yeah, the maintenance. I think, and that's kind of what the solutions, when we're thinking of them, the solutions we want to implement would be in city right away. And even if the one solution would require an easement, those would be city maintained practices and facilities. And I think that's kind of, we want to try to stick to that, because that's, we don't want, in order to have to get a maintenance agreement for the future, I don't think that is the route we want to go. So any of this structures, even if it's green infrastructure, would be city maintained.
Okay.
In future.
So yeah, your question about where would the water go or how would it get there? So the intent was to convey it through some conveyance structure to get it over here. And like I said, it is a challenge. You can see that this contour is a low spot in the road. Either through a trench drain, either pipe it to some distance, create curb and gutter along this section, and just let it sheet flow right down into this catch base. If that was the design, the way we would approach it, I would say, hey, what was this catch basin designed for? Where are the plans for that? And we kind of back calculate, can it handle that? Is it any additional flow, or was it already accounted for when it was designed? What I picked up was this homeowner has it's kind of like a concrete wall and then a sloped grassy area down to the edge of the road. So I hope that answers your question.
Well,
as,
all of these homes sit lower than the street. So I guess my thought was that if the water is expected to run across the street, run, down the edge of it, it's just going to pour right down those people's driveways.
well, that's what I
So-
was saying, that this area would have to be rehabilitated to account for that, because like I
But
said.
not just at 105, at each of the other subsequent houses up here to the right. Those other driveways.
Right here.
That one, and then keep going, and you're up to Marty's, and then you're up to the new house, and then you're up to the Katz's. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
they
this is,
all sit lower,
yeah. Well, this is the one catch basin where we wanted to capture that flow.
And what is the address there at that existing inlet?
Don't have it on here. Probably it's 107, 109, maybe.
Yeah, I'm a little messed up by the picture here. I can't tell. We've had construction up the way.
I have my Google Maps open, and that looks to be 131 Spa Drive with that
Okay, so that
angled
looks like,
driveway.
all right, so it looks like it's between, I think I got it, between Stu Hecker's house on the right and the left would be, okay. Okay,
And
all
that,
right.
like Pete was alluding to, this is very preliminary concept, and we need a little more detail to really know the elevations, if it's something that we could get away with conveying down in a roadside gutter or, curbed kind of gutter situation, or something that would have to go under,
Yeah,
as
right.
well as the catch basin, like, is that on that slope? Will it actually be able to intercept the flow, or will a flanking inlet need to be installed? Or so there's a lot of various options in that type of scenario, and we don't know yet if it would be solvable above ground or have to go underground, if that pipe could handle it. So there's a lot of other factors into it, but the idea would be to
Mhm.
convey that down safely through a storm drain network or a closed guttered system, rather than having it just flow into that property.
Okay, and then my other was the curb inset and the space for pedestrians, dogs. And
Yeah,
cars.
yeah. Part of this presentation is to get feedback like you're providing, is the community amenable to something like this? And, what I'm hearing from you is there's going to be some challenges, maybe some loss of parking space. But as I showed earlier in that picture, I thought there was a dead section of asphalt that maybe we could make use of. It may be a very narrow curb inset, but maybe we could do it from the existing edge of the roadway, with its sole function is to alleviate some of that runoff that comes there. And if it does overflow, then boom, it kicks over into the curb and gutter and goes down the rest of the street. If folks are not comfortable with this type of bump out that you see here, we could make something work. But like I said, this presentation is to get a feedback from you folks. Hey,
Mhm.
do you like what we're presenting here? Can you foresee, being involved in something like that? So
And
that's,
Okay.
it's always an offset of, it also provides traffic calming. That'll have people driving a little slower down the roadway, if it's a proven traffic calming measure. But you're right, it affects the where you would walk. You did mention about parking on it, and that these facilities wouldn't be something that you'd be able to park a car on top of.
Right, right. Your picture has a sidewalk here, and I think we have very, very little sidewalk within the neighborhood.
yeah, I just thought a very cool picture, but it illustrated, how it would
Right.
bump out into the road.
Right, yep. Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 more questions, John, Simon, and Ryan, and I'll let them in that order. Okay, John, you're good to go. Oh, John, you can unmute now.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Taylor. I live at 144 Spa Drive, and my wife is Cindy Domacy, who did a lot of the original legwork for all this. I just had a few comments, many of which Heidi has already addressed. I just wanted to reinforce what she had said about the assurances that were given by the city to us that the enclave would not negatively impact the water coming down that hillside, and clearly it appears that it is negatively impacting it. The second thing was, I agree with her comments about the curb insets. I don't think we had the road widths. I mean, to end up with a 16-foot road width on what is meant to be a two-way street, I don't know what the legal minimums are, but 16 feet does not seem sufficient. Then the 95 Spa Drive that we were just discussing, it's not clear to me how that water would go uphill, because from 95 Spa Drive to go to the east is I believe uphill, significantly uphill. So I don't understand how a curb gutter could possibly transport the water uphill. And finally, is the presentation that you gave available to us?
It will be posted on the project webpage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so to go back to this, like I said, you would need, yes, it is, I think I clearly showed that it was a challenging situation. I mean, you do have some options here. You could, in theory, create a trench, pipe it some distance till you get it to the point where it's sloping downhill and daylight it. Or you do an under drain system within the right of way and you just directly connect it to this catch basin. But it's not an unsolvable condition, is what I'm trying to say. But it does require a lot more survey. I mean, just from the GIS, you're not going to base a design simply off of this. So, I wouldn't let something like that thwart me if I was an engineer. I'd try to find a way to make it work. There's other options than simply open section curb and gutter.
Sure.
So as far as the bump outs, yes, I mentioned that you guys have very narrow streets. They're 20 feet wide, and a bump out would claim 4 feet and limit it down to 16-foot wide right, open section of road. And again, part of this exercise is to get feedback from residents like you, like, no, we don't like that. And, we can say, okay, it doesn't seem to be a very popular decision. Doing the curb inset, because you're going to be outside the right of way, that's a little more difficult because you have to claim residents' properties, and Michael has to get involved and see how that can work. And is a resident amenable to that, somebody coming in and taking a little bit of their property to put in a bioretention? They're just options that we present now, preliminary concepts, and a way to introduce green infrastructure to help with alleviation of some of the drainage. But the feedback is important. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this presentation.
Right. I mean, the 16 feet road width concerned me. Now, where we live on Spa Drive, the little stub of Spa Drive that leads to the circle where our house is actually only 14 feet wide. And if a truck parks on that, I've had many times, when I've been unable to access my property because a delivery truck has parked there. And emergency vehicles have no access. If there's anyone parked there, like a large pickup truck or a panel truck, they're effectively blocking the road. Now, this would be 2 feet wider, but still, I would have concerns over only a 16-foot width available.
Right. Yeah, understood.
Absolutely.
Just for clarity, Michael, Peter, were those was that detail focused more on Boxwood Road, where you would use?
Yeah, that's where I thought there was potential, as I mentioned.
I just want to make that clear. Yeah.
Right. I just thought that little bit of dead asphalt, can we do something with that? You know, just
Right,
not just curb and gutter, but maybe make something work.
right. I just wanted to make it clear that you were focusing that application more on Boxwood than anywhere else.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I got Simon, Ryan, and Jerry in the queue. Simon, you're going to be let in now. All right, Simon, you're good. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you all for doing this tonight. So I'd just like to say I'm glad the city's paying some attention to our neighborhood. I think that's a great thing. The issues with the drainage problems are also that our neighborhood streets become a mess after a rainstorm. And I'd really like the city to take this opportunity not only to fix some drainage problems, but to put some sidewalks in our neighborhood and beautify it a little bit, because we have a lot of kids, middle school kids from Bates, who walk through our neighborhood. We have school bus stops. The school can barely fit down the street. And this is supposed to be Spa Creek Trail, and we could really use the pedestrian space. I mean, you have to, when it's trash day, you can't walk on the sidewalks. There's mailboxes, there's trash cans. You have to walk in the street. And if it's rained or whatever, it's like, where are you supposed to go? So I'd really like to see a sidewalk on both sides of Silopana. I'd like to see a sidewalk on Boxwood, where they don't have a sidewalk at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. We have Ryan and Jerry. Ryan, you're coming in next. All right, Ryan, you're good to go.
Thank you to the panelists for this, working for the city to look through this. I'm coming as a resident here in the neighborhood. So can everyone hear me?
Yep.
I'm clear.
Okay, thank you. So earlier on, you mentioned some terms that I wasn't quite familiar with. One of the ones you mentioned was open section. And I quickly figured out that means a road without curb and gutter. And that's the reality of our neighborhood, other than the section of the section of Silopana from the intersection at Spa Drive. I don't even know if it, and all the way down to where Silopana terminates at Acton Road. And that was the only reason there's curb and gutter there that I can surmise, along with the sidewalk, is because that was the route the city decided to install Spa Creek Trail. But Boxwood, Acton Road, Spa Drive, and even the portion of Silopana from Spa Drive on out to Spa Road is all open section road. And one of the biggest problems after a rain is that the washout coming off of properties is pretty significant, and that silts up all of these storm drains and eventually ends up into Spa Creek. Without the curb and gutter on the roads in the neighborhood, a lot of the residents take advantage of just being able to pull onto their properties, whether it's parallel parking or straight up in the yard parking. But over time, that ends up compacting the soils in the lawns, cannot maintain vegetation, and leads to additional erosion. So without a curb in place to, in a sense, I like to use the term armor the edge of the road, the residents of our neighborhood are taking advantage of this. And I can't really blame them, because there's nothing to prevent them from doing that. It's their own property. They're within certain, they can do what they want. to a certain extent. But I think installing curb and gutter throughout the neighborhood at the very least needs to be a very important part of this, because where the road has an open section and the rain comes and anything more than a shower ends up carving out gullies at the edge of the road, because there's no gutter to convey this stormwater. And carving out those gutters, the gullies at the side of the road, whether it's from neighbors parking or delivery trucks running off the edge of the road and rutting off the edge of the road, whatever it is, it may seem little at one little incident, but we're talking about this has been adding up over years and years and years. And if the city doesn't install curb and gutter, the other stormwater management solutions you install are eventually going to be negated by the continuing silt that gets washed into Spa Creek. And that doesn't make sense to me. And that doesn't seem like the right thing to do, to treat some portions of the problems in the neighborhood and not deal with other aspects of the overall problem within the neighborhood. So I like the ideas of the bioplanters adjacent to the roadway. I think it's an opportunity for the city, when they install curb and gutters, they could install these bioplanter islands alongside the edge of the road. Whether it's a curb bump out, I think I would favor. It wouldn't necessitate the taking of an easement out of a homeowner's property. And as long as it is within the right of way, I don't see a big issue. From my understanding, these right of ways are 30-foot right of ways. I know Boxwood from Silopana out to Hilltop is much wider, or at least the road takes up more of the right of way. But throughout the rest of the neighborhood, we're at best not even approaching 2/3 of utilization of the city right of way. So I think there is room to do these bio planters, curb bump outs, things like that as part of this fixing these stormwater management problems. And that can all be done comprehensively, along with installing curb and gutter, armoring the edge of the roads. You can still do where I know there's another term, sheet flow is important. You guys don't want to concentrate flows. So there are, you can have cutouts within the curb and gutter at predetermined places or regularly to allow water to sheet off and drain over land instead of continuing to concentrate it. So there's plenty of opportunities to deal with the stormwater and limit the concentrations, deal with the concentrations where they're at, installing the curb and gutter, providing the bioplanter islands, whether it's a curb bump out. And this at the same time gives the city an opportunity to, at least at the very minimum, realign the roads in the neighborhood and fix some of the problems, especially at the curve at Silopana between Boxwood and Spa Drive. The bioplanters as curb bump outs have an opportunity to, maybe switch sides of the right of way for the primary travel lanes to also provide additional traffic calming throughout the neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the city to partner with us as a neighborhood and deal with the stormwater management problems and, frankly, increase the quality of life of the city residents who are residents of this neighborhood, because these are all issues we have to deal with. And some of us are getting a little tired of it. And so we hope the city will work with us, continue to work with us. We're thankful for the effort you're putting in so far. I am certainly pleased with the presentation that was given tonight and the depth of detail, because we weren't sure in some of the discussions amongst ourselves earlier, we've had in the preceding days amongst residents in the neighborhood, that it was that detailed yet. So I was definitely thankful for the effort you guys have put in. And thankful for the suggestions you've made. We're also thankful for acknowledging the problems that we have been telling you are out there, whether it's from the Enclave or from the Admiral Farragut Apartments and the various places in the neighborhood. Thank you for your time and effort that you put in so far. And I think that's probably about all I have for the moment.
Well, I'll just say I appreciate you saying that. And that was the whole purpose of putting the web page up with the questionnaire, so we could get this kind of feedback. If I hadn't met you out in the field, maybe you could have gone on the web page and filled something out, but to hear that from you directly is very important. And that's the whole function of this presentation, is to get that kind of feedback so we encompass everything and then, come up with whatever conceptual solutions or addressed by the city, some of the other fixes that they can do. But that's exactly the kind of feedback that we need to hear. I just want to appreciate you saying that.
Okay, we thank you, Ryan. We have Jerry Alton next.
How are you again?
Good.
So to reiterate what Heidi said, I guess my first question is, Matt Waters was our contact at that time when they started regrading at the Enclave. I'm assuming none of you have any of that information and pictures of what was happening when they first started grading with the flooding issues, because he was out to that property with us as homeowners, including people on Silopana and the court, to show what was happening.
Yeah, the only plans that I've reviewed were the as-built plans of the Enclave. They check whether everything was installed and they get inverts. So that's all I've seen in terms of historical information about that property. I don't
Okay,
know. Michael,
is Matt still with the city?
Yeah, hey, Jerry. Yeah, he's still here, and this doesn't. I don't know. This doesn't sound familiar. The photos of the grading. I'm not too sure. This, I know. I was here after the Enclave was built, so I'm not too sure about these. What you're talking about. If you want to go ahead and send me, you can send me the photos just so we can make sure we include it in the report and everything.
Okay.
And make sure we.
Well, and the reason I'm saying that is because during some of our residents association meetings with Matt, other city employees, as well as David Gerald, we had talked about the driveways on the odd side coming out of the court, 55, 71. I don't remember all the numbers, is how that water was coming out of there and flooding the driveways and cracking them, that they were talking about holding the Enclave responsible for doing those repairs. So is that still not possible, or not possible for them to put in a curb at their expense for the water damage that is happening to the private driveways and to the properties being eroded?
So I'm not too familiar with the whole, with this, if there are any agreements or any conversations between the two. I can get with Matt to see if there is an avenue where there was something we can maybe get implemented. If it was something that, was clear that was damaged, that we can have them repair. But I can't speak to, I'm not too sure off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, Jerry, that's one reason why I asked that question on what Michael explained is that documentation of what we have is an approved grading plan. So, I don't know if these conversations happened before that or what, but it resulted in a grading plan with their stormwater measures included in that plan. So our stormwater engineers' responsibilities are to make sure that they are installed adequately and maintained, and that grading plan has not been closed out yet. So that's yeah.
And I agree with that, but it was
Okay.
always, well, we have to wait for the project to be completed to make sure the underwater tanks are working properly. In the meantime, we were still flooding and damage was happening. And we were always told during the whole process from start to where they are now is wait until they're completed, because I guess that whatever they have underground is going to work, and it clearly hasn't worked from day one. So why there isn't any accountability for them to also have some type of financial giving back to the community, what has ruined some of these properties, whether it be the front yards eroding or the damage to any of the properties or the driveway.
Hey, Jerry, why we have you on, can I ask you two questions? One is, which are the driveways that were damaged? You said those are on Silopana?
They're on the odd side of Silopana.
Of the
So
road?
like
or the
I
port?
own 65 and 71. And when the water comes down, it comes back up into the driveway.
Okay.
And it comes all the, if you look at all the driveways coming out of the court, you can see after a rain or even during the rain, if you drive through, you can see, you know, there could be up to 6 feet of water that is ponding and pooling there.
6 feet, wow.
You can see as you're coming down the roadway where it has eroded the property in front.
So that's the east side of the road, Silopana Road.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then my other question was, you mentioned, you know, what it was like before, what it was like during, and then you were waiting for after.
Correct.
Was the drainage condition before, during, and after all the same, or has it changed from where the flooding is occurring and the amount of it?
Well, it's still coming up through the driveways and it's still coming out considerably. We just don't have also the dirty water from when they were first grading.
From during construction, sure.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
But it doesn't seem that there's been that it's lessened a whole lot from the first time. I guess maybe I thought that these underground containers were going to be miraculous and catch most of this water, and it doesn't seem to be doing that.
So
We
it's more
still
of
get
like
flooded. We still get flooded on the street.
Was the property that was there before also causing runoff problems before the enclave went in?
Yes.
Okay. And is it it's gotten worse with the enclave development versus the older property?
Yes, because the first problem was when they built the Chatham Lane. And then you have the enclave. So if you go back through those properties, because of whether it's the grading or whatever, everything's going to come downhill anyway. We're the lowest point.
Yeah.
So it all comes down on us. So like, say I'm at 66. So at the back, I'm sure we're getting from Chatham Lane, we're getting from behind Admiral Farragut. So you're getting multiple points. I don't know about further up, you know, 62 maybe getting from behind Chatham.
Yeah.
And then getting the enclave as well. I'm not real sure about that.
Yeah, you get a chunk. It looks like, if you can see my screen, you guys are getting a chunk of Chatham Lane, and it comes down across your property, in addition to what's running off of the development at the Farragut Court Apartments.
Right.
So,
and I think Farragut Court is also coming from Chatham Lane, because if you go back there when it rains, obviously, you know, they're on a hill dumping down on us as well, or behind Admiral Farragut Apartments.
Right.
So from the side of there, it's coming as well.
Yeah, and that's a lot of, you know, pervious area that drains there unmanaged.
Yeah, Jerry, the elephant in the room is the fact that Admiral Farragut had no stormwater measures installed, and you're getting a confluence of that. So I don't know how much we can isolate the enclave for damages, if you will.
Well, I'm not talking about behind the property.
Okay.
East side of the Silopana Road, from where it's coming clearly from the enclave. It runs out of the court and comes down both sides of And I guess that's what Mr. Wells's property. So it's coming from that hill there and coming right out and coming right over.
Yeah, this is Mr. Wells where my cursor is.
Right, and that's exactly where it comes out between Mr. Wells and the lady who lives next door
Yeah,
in the duplex. So it comes down there, comes out onto Silopana Court and goes across the street, the water flooding, and then it comes down both sides of the road.
yeah. Well, whatever's falling, this is an earlier photograph, but whatever's falling on this hillside is, just sheet flows down into these properties. And then
Yeah,
that,
and
go ahead.
no, yeah, I was just gonna say, with the enclave, the only, we do have to, I think they did have stormwater on site, it's gonna be on us to make sure that they're still, like I was saying before, they might have designed something that was intended to, improve the runoff down that hill, but it's still gonna be on them to make sure it's, maintenance with stormwater, especially controlling runoff is key to making sure our runoff works. So, we can work more, making sure we make sure they are inspecting their underground tanks. Is it working properly? I know they have other rain gardens with swales that were intended to, maintain some runoff before it goes down the hill. So making sure that they're keeping up with the maintenance, making sure that they're not, again, the design was hopefully is not always how it works out. So we're gonna have to, and it's on the city. We're gonna have to make sure that that HOA is still maintaining their facilities, making sure that they're not, the berms are in good shape, vegetation still in intact. So, but like I said, we're still that grading, the bond's still open. So, that's opportunity for us to go make sure that they, before they close out that permit, that is working properly. So we can definitely look into more, making sure that what was installed is working. So, and then we'll have to, design something on Silopana Road to help.
Okay. I have Jane Brahman next, followed by John Taylor.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. My name is Cameron DeGaff. I live at 57 Silopana Road, and I just wanted to kind of chime in on that section of the neighborhood a little bit more. I've lived here my whole life, so I kind of know how the water comes into this neighborhood. I've witnessed it for a long time. It's obvious that the drainage that they put in on the backside of that enclave is not sufficient. Whether or not we can do anything about that or not, I think we just need to try to come up with a solution at this point to kind of redirect that water. Because like Jerry was saying, it does come down that Silopana court and it crosses over the other side of Silopana more than it ever did in the past. And that's, I think, some of the erosion that she was referring to in front of 55 Silopana, my neighbor, which I was surprised that wasn't noted on your initial survey going through there. And then the curb system on Silopana on that side of the street, fairly broken up, and it starts downhill of my driveway at 57 Silopana. So, and since I've lived at this property, I've tried to put some things in place to stop the water from coming into my driveway and through my foundation of my house. So I've stopped a lot of it from coming in there myself. But I think that upper section of Silopana definitely needs some type of curb system on that side. And it would be awesome if at some point where Silopana Circle meets Silopana Road, that there could be some type of stormwater drain pipe that can help that water flow into the basin, which is where C and D is marked on the bottom of Silopana. I also think that that stream run in between C, D, and E on your map, that's where all the water flows, basically. I mean, like you guys said, most of that stuff from Silopana eventually comes down to CD and goes back up there. I don't know if there's any way that could get cleaned up back in that area, because that's where all the water goes, and maybe we can increase the flow of water through there and get it into Spot Creek, and while doing that also maybe help improve the water quality of all this stuff also, because like you guys said, that's the main input of water into the headwaters of Spot Creek. So I think there just needs to be a little bit more focus on this side of Silopana and the whole Silopana side of the neighborhood. Because like you said, at the court there at Mr. Wells or whatever, you said there's some sewage and stuff and other stuff in the way there, but I think it's a pretty serious problem. And I think that's the root of it. So I think that should be focused on a little bit more.
That's a good point. I appreciate it. I think, yeah, we'll expand it. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of feedback we need to hear.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question on a broad scale? Because I've heard some approaches from the residents on installing, go right in and do curb and gutter and other measures. In looking at this project as a whole now, and this is a question to the engineers, how much underground versus topography are you using? In other words, you mentioned a storm drain going under Silopana. How much of that would take the runoff versus using the topography to drain? Is there a percentage difference? I mean, how much of that water runoff would be helped with the storm drain underneath the road, where you're not dealing with curb and gutter and trying to berm it, et cetera? Do you understand my question?
I think so. I forget the previous, the guy who just spoke, but what he was saying is, if there was some kind of collection system right off of Silopana Court, provided we could get away from the logistics of the existing sanitary and water line there, that would capture a lot of that runoff that comes off the enclave, with the closed system. So that would probably eliminate a good portion of what's causing the problems on, I guess it's the odd side of Silopana Road, Ms. Alton had described. And then it also, right, it also gives the homeowners options if they can put in, daylight their drain pipes or their roof drains into a system that exists along Silopana, a closed system that they can drain their runoff.
Right. And you say the limit there is existing lines that you might not be able to get a big enough pipe to get a storm drain underground?
Yeah, so this is basically the high point, I think, well, somewhere up in here, but yeah, this is a sanitary sewer and a water line that drained here, and it's based off of the as-built data. So you can see that, to fit something in there is quite challenging. And I did show a conceptual measure of a storm drain line that comes up Silopana Road. And I said that was a long-term measure, a major CIP project, with, engineering, design, all that kind of stuff. But it is something that we are showing. And I think it is feasible, but like I said, this is an old system, and there are some challenges to avoid the existing, utilities that are underground here. But I think it would help a lot if there was a closed storm drain system that some of these residents could connect or drain into. It would alleviate a lot of the drainage problem that was just recently described by the homeowner who just spoke, and Mrs. Alton said she owned a few properties here as well. So, but curb and gutter probably won't solve it all. Like you said, this is the root of the problem, what's coming off of the enclave. I mean, the depth of ponding that she described, that's a lot of water.
Yeah, I think your approach to this, and correct me if I'm wrong, versus fortifying with curb and gutter was, let's look at what we have as far as the as-built. Let's look at the existing topography and see what is the best, most efficient and long-term, short-term solution to this. I think it's what I'm hearing. And I think we can't lose sight of the fact that there is a great opportunity to go underground, to use a storm line underground so we don't have runoff. So yes, I hope that we'll be able to fit something in there.
Yeah, and I don't mean to get ahead of Michael, but I hope I don't get in trouble. But I mean, if we had carte blanche, to do what we wanted to do, the ideal thing would be to put in some kind of system here to capture all that runoff within the enclave property through a closed system and get it out on Silopana Road and drain it all down. But Michael with the city, they have some challenges to get a lot of easement to do something like that. So we try to do a lot of what we can, with the feedback we're getting tonight, to capture what we can within the right of way that would help alleviate a lot of those problems.
Yeah. So residents, please get in your surveys.
So I think,
collect them.
in general, you talk about storm drain and getting it underground, and yes, that's always great. But the challenges we have are, you mentioned easements to be able to put those structures in, utilities that are in place that would conflict with the pipe or have to, resolve other utility relocations. And then the other one is just relief or drainage. If we have a certain amount of depth, where the stream starts on Silopana and it goes down to down the creek, that's not very deep. And so building a system of hundreds of feet long, it's getting enough cover, getting enough depth that can actually still outfall. So those are the main things we worry about in a storm drain design, is how much depth, which does affect the size of pipe we can handle, and then what kind of utility conflicts do we have? Those are typical. Whereas with the overland, and I think Brian mentioned it and kind of answered his, the comment I was going to give him is, if we curb everything, then you're actually increasing, the amount of runoff on the road. Right. Or if we widen the road and we add more asphalt, that actually increases the amount of runoff. Right. So that's the balance, But he answered it where if you do curb it, if there are properties where it can still pass on to, then curb openings are our friend, because we want to spread that water around, but send it where we want it to go. But just to curb everything up would actually end up in a big increase in discharge and more runoff at some point. So it's definitely a balance.
Be like Ellicott City. Thank you. I just wanted to say that you looked at different options. It's a mixed bag, and you do have some relief with underground, but it's not all on top. So thank you.
Okay, we got two more. John Taylor, followed by Ryan.
Oh, hello again. So I understand the discussion about the city checking to make sure that the enclave system is being maintained. I have a little bit more of a fundamental question. So the enclave designed their stormwater management, we were told at least, to ensure that it would improve, not degrade the situation for people downhill. And the city approved that. If it turns out that the design did not adequately control stormwater, who has the responsibility for that? Is there any obligation for the enclave to go back and to ensure that they have not increased the amount of stormwater that's shedding down into the community? Or is that the city's responsibility? I can't believe it's the residents' responsibility, but could you fill me in on that?
Well, and John, and I apologize. I don't know. It's tough because I know that I've heard that the assurances were made and all discussions were had and all that. It's some I'm not too sure how to answer that, because I don't think. It's tough to see what was actually agreed upon and all that. I don't know the specifics, but when it was made, I would think that, it should have happened in the planning and design phase before any permits were issued, that it was shown. But as far as what we can do now, that after it's been built, it'd have to be something pretty concrete as far as what was decided, and as far as runoff increase, and making the situation worse downstream, in order for us to go back to them and then make them actually fix it. Because I would think that these discussions were going on as the design was happening. So then it was, the design, we designed it such that this doesn't happen. But now the fact that it's been built, I'm not too sure if there's an avenue that allows the city to go back and really make it on them to fix the problem again, unfortunately. But I know Jerry mentioned Matt was kind of involved with that. I'll touch back with him to see if there was something more, concrete as far as what was decided and how it was going to be determined if a certain situation downstream was worse than how it was existing. And obviously it's evidence that it was. So it's tough. Again, I'd have to see if there was something more concrete that was in place.
Okay. Hey, John, this is Mike Johnson. I agree with what Mike Rosberg has just said. I think that the most expedient way to approach this is to move forward with the capital improvement program project that is that's proposed. Following, building upon the concept that AMT will come up with, sort of take it through to full design. I would suspect that trying to go back and get the enclave to make improvements in air quotes is going to be a very challenging undertaking and a very lengthy undertaking if the city is even able to prevail in that activity. The best route would probably be just to move forward with addressing the conveyance of the water that is coming from that site and some of the other subwatersheds. And that would probably be my recommendation as to how to approach it. I mean, we could take a look, but I don't really have much confidence that that's going to bear much fruit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have Ryan and Simon next. Okay, Ryan, you can unmute. You're good to go.
Okay, thank you again. I just want to reiterate what Cam was saying earlier, and everyone's sort of touched on this since Cam was mentioning it. He's the homeowner at 57 Silopana there. But up there with the enclave, I mean, I do think, and the study that you guys have presented has shown that you're talking about more inlets and underground conveyance due to the volumes that are being generated. But I think to sum up the situation in our neighborhood now is that basically I think many of us are of the opinion that the roads of our neighborhood are themselves our storm drain, in addition to several large backyard areas and things like that. There's too much water being generated offsite that is flowing across our neighborhood, and it ends up on a huge portion of that water does end up on Silopana and goes down into the little ravine that runs between Boxwood and Silopana and on into Spa Creek. So I think, and you guys have shown that, but I just want to iterate it. It's a combination of all these things. I'm not asking you to pave all 30 feet of the right of way of all the roads. What I'm saying is that the curb and gutter, and you have a valid argument in that impervious area, if you increase the impervious area, you're going to increase more runoff. But what's already happened is you look along Boxwood, and anything from the road up to the property line has almost already been filled in with gravel, or it's been filled in by the homeowner themselves with asphalt. and it's all impervious already. So in installing curb and gutter, you're going to kind of limit or start to limit some of that soil compaction that contributes to the runoff and silt. You're going to limit the edges of the road that sort of become gullies themselves. And so you cannot, I don't think open section road, I understand the benefit of sheet flow and not concentrating it. But the problem is with an open section road, the water just creates its own gutter, often the soils next to the road, if it doesn't run completely through somebody's yard. So, because most of us have already tried to prevent water from running down our driveways into our properties. So we're trying to keep the water at the road that's flowing down the road. We don't want it to come across our properties unless we can somehow get it in a controlled manner. And so that would be the sections of curb that have been either cut and allow you had a term for it earlier, but maybe homeowners will allow one of those on their, I mean, some of us certainly would be amicable of that, not all of us. But with the curb bump outs in the island and installing the curb and gutters, I think you're just going to help control this more, not generate more, because we already have so much. The problem is already out of hand. And in all of these solutions contribute to the comprehensive problem solving that we need in our neighborhood. We need it all. And I just hope the city will keep moving forward and allow this to happen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Simon? Okay, Simon, you're good to go.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, I'm actually here with my father. He's the resident at 56 Silopana. So he'd be happy. He'd be super happy to provide an easement for the city in his, about a half-acre lot. And he has a river that comes from the enclave through the backyard and then next couple neighbors down. He'd be happy to provide an easement for a bioretention, so in his back lot. So there you got one right there that will handle a lot of the runoff that's coming down.
Awesome.
Just spitballing an idea real quick. What about like a stormwater conveyance through there? Not just the bioretention to grab it, but actual storm drain infrastructure easement through there.
Well, it'd be okay with me as long there's like 20 giant oak and maple and sycamore trees back there. I wouldn't want them to be sacrificed.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or very few anyway. But otherwise, that'd be okay with me. And I have a long gravel driveway that it could something to go under that into the stormwater drain you guys were talking about putting on Silopana, for example.
Yeah, I just mentioned
that's not going to solve the whole thing because there's still a lot of water that comes through the Silopana court.
But it's a lot of it. I was just going to mention that I had come up with a concept measure that actually ran through your lot, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
So it's something, I don't know if I get in trouble with Michael to show it to you independently, but it would be part of the report. But now that it seems you're very agreeable, with, easement taking and maybe putting in a bioretention, I think there's a lot more we could do there. But really, you'd want to get it as it comes off of the enclave before it gets to your property. So,
yeah.
But I did come up with something that uses your property through a series of under drain pipes and actually daylights through the side of the curb, but something I can show you maybe independently if Michael's cool with that.
Well, right. Yeah, I think that's the whole, all this discussion has been great. And I think we have, our team's got a lot to go back and revisit and rethink and read it. And, and again, this is concept level, I think is another important thing to point out. A lot of the details, I know we talked about how does it actually get there? Is it going to be curb or whatnot? I think a lot of details in the design phase, those will get kind of looked at, once we get more detailed survey and whatnot, that it can happen. I think Peter said, a lot, it can get there. We're going to make it happen and make it work, but a lot of that comes in the more detailed design phase. This is more, but like this discussion, as far as conceptually thinking how to get it there is what we're going to be revising right now, going back and taking a look at.
Plus, I just want to mention the trench. I think it was been discussed, but just to reemphasize, the trench that goes between Boxwood and Silopana into Spot Creek. Again, if you could get the homeowners' cooperation, seems that'd be a great place to slow the water down by putting in a series of retention pools and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because we don't want to get it out of our neighborhood by destroying Spot Creek.
Right.
No. That's why green infrastructure is, a component that we'd like to promote, and hopefully the community will be, agreeable to it.
Okay, we got Jane's got another question.
Yeah, just really quick, Cam here again. I think this problem up on Silopana here is gonna need a lot of neighbor cooperation, and like Mr. Brown said, he's willing for an easement in his yard, and I would be willing to have some type of easement going through my yard as well, because my yard backs up right to that stream system behind Silopana. And that would greatly increase the efficiency of getting that water into that area where it's ultimately going anyways, and it can kind of bypass the rest of the street possibly. So just wanted to say that, and I think we need to get really creative on this and figure out a solution.
What is the address of your property again?
57.
Okay, 57. All right, gotcha.
Is the easement question on the survey? I'm sorry, I didn't see the survey. Is there a question about would you be receptive to an easement or anything like that in the survey?
No, but that's a very good point, Alderman. I'll modify that questionnaire.
And then before we leave, I have a residents ask me what the next step is.
Yeah, so I think, again, this has been a great conversation. I'm really happy with the feedback. I think what we're going to do now, I think hopefully by the end of this calendar year, we're going to really wrap up this concept report and design, with all the, feedback that we've got. We might even, if we have time, we can maybe schedule another community meeting with revised layouts and all. And then once that happens, it's into the design and permitting phase. That's much more detailed, survey and even the land acquisition. But then we're going to have to, once the concept report's done, we're going to have to kind of rescope and figure out what we're really going to move forward with first versus kind of like we're talking about the short term, long term, and how we're going to go about that. But then it is going to be, probably, I think, like you said, I think the construction for this is slated for most likely fall 2023 is when, if we did more of one of the long-term construction phases, I guess. But kind of like I said, if there's something in between that is available, we'll definitely look into that, based off of what was talked about now. So that's kind of the rough outline of what's next.
Thank you.
I am not showing any more questions.
Okay, great. Well, again, thanks everyone, all the residents who showed up. That was great. A lot of good questions, a lot of good discussions back and forth. Like Peter said, we're going to post this. We'll post this meeting up on the website so everyone can view it if they need to, or pass it along. Please fill out the questionnaire, and my information's there too. If you just want to reach out to me, questions you didn't get answered, or you think of something tomorrow, later on, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm available. With that, I'd like to say thanks everyone, and look forward to moving this project forward. I think we're moving forward in the right direction.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.